Hey folks, welcome to the Wrench Turners podcast, the show that's about improving the life, well-being, and productivity of mechanics everywhere. I am your host, Joshua Taylor, founder of Wrench Turners Online, and today we have a special guest. We have a special guest with here, a long-term technician working for a great set of people. He was referred into another one of our great family friends, as it were, from Service Drive Live, Clinton Cruz. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, Clinton, thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving us a little bit of your time. Awesome. Now, Clinton, we haven't really met. So, like everybody else that's going to be listening and watching, tell us what got you into the trade.
It was kind of by accident, if I'm being honest. I had my plans quite differently. I wanted to be a fireman. And so I was actually taking some night classes to help me to prepare for that. A lot of it is being able to interview well. And so I was going through some night classes, and what happened was my girlfriend's car broke. And so our roommate he was taking a hiatus from working on heavy equipment. And so what he told me was that he wasn't going to get dirty, but he would point his finger and he'd let me borrow his tools. So I said, all right, no problem. So the next day when the sun came up, we went down and we picked up a CV axle for this thing. And true to his word, he didn't touch a thing on that car. He cracked the beer open and he proceeded to point his finger and, you need to do this and you need to do that. And he watched me struggle for a bit. All of this was on a gravel driveway on my back. And I did it. I hadn't had any formal training at that time. I was 18. And when it was all said and done, he looked at me and he told me, "Fireman, huh?" And so I was just working at a receiving warehouse at the time, just trying to make it until the application came in where I could apply for being a fireman. And I got laid off. And so I'm bouncing around just looking for any job. Any job will do. I don't care what it is. I just need something to pay the bills until I become a fireman. And I was walking past the gas station and my buddy came flying out of there and he says, "Hey man, what are you doing? I ain't seen you in a while." Went to high school with him, and so I hadn't seen him for a little bit. And he says, "What are you doing?" Saw me with a bunch of papers in my hand, and they were job applications. I said, "Oh man, no, don't do that. Why don't you come in here? I'll get you a job." Walked me right into the owner of the gas station, which was also a repair facility, and said, "Hey, I know this guy. He's a hard worker." And gave me the job on the spot. I didn't even interview or nothing. He said, "If he says that you're good and you work hard, I believe him because he works hard," and just gave me the job. So that was my introduction into cars.
So that was really, well, one thing, trial by fire, the fact that you're on your back on gravel, you got the instantaneous experience of how awful it is to lay on gravel.
Yes.
It's one of the most rewarding things that you can do when you're done, because then you realize that you just fixed something while in active pain, having like all kinds of little jagged edges jamming into your back, into your spine, into your ass while you're trying to fix something. And of course, by the time you're 15 minutes into trying to do a CV axle on the ground, which I've done more times than I wish to count, that's not a pleasant job.
No.
When you're not on a hoist. It's even less unpleasant, less pleasant when you're on gravel. So the fact that you trial by fire, that's awesome. So by accident, because you needed a cool. So what you were working out of a repair shop and a gas station. So what was that? Now it's interesting because you kind of accidentally gotten into becoming a mechanic, but at the same time, you're now endorsed, as it were. What was your first year like? Because typically, the average experience thus far is one of kind of two things. Either it's nothing but shit. You're shoveling, you're pushing a broom, you're getting coffee, you're a porter, you're somebody's bitch, or you get to work on stuff right away, and they do the oil changes, do the tires, but here's work. Do the oil changes, do the tires, here's work, and that's kind of either one or the other. Where did you fall in there?
Okay, so that is a very accurate assessment of how it played out for me. Um, when I got hired, I didn't get hired to work on cars initially. I got hired to work the gas station pumps, and it was a full service gas station. So I
Mm-hmm.
was running from car to car, taking their money, running it into the cashier, getting the change, running it back out to the car, adjusting tire pressure, topping off fluid levels, wiping windows. And so the head mechanic of the shop was watching me, and he asked the boss if he could pull me into the shop because he liked how I was hustling and I could prioritize customers. I knew who had to get what done because I only had enough time from when the pump started to the pump clicked to do what needed to be done. And so he decided that he could use that in the shop. So he pulled me into the shop, and then he proceeded to do just like you said, do this, do that. He would set me on tasks, no explanation other than do this. And when I was done with that, I'd go to him. I said, okay, I did this. Now what? Do this. I'm done with that. Done with that. Come back. Okay, I did this. Now what? And so we had a very good relationship, he and I, because I would ask him what he wanted me to do, and I would just do exactly what he told me to do. So his frustration level with me was a lot lower than it was with other people who would try to expand and build on the instructions. I would do exactly what he said and show back up. I did this, boss. Um, and so that's how I wound up at a dealer, is when he decided that he was leaving the place, he picked up the phone, and unbeknownst to me, he was a dealership technician that was trying to start his own place. And so
Mm-hmm.
he went into this gas station as a part owner. And so now he was leaving this place to go start his own. And so he told me that he wanted me to get some training. And so he referred me to the dealership that he had spent time at. He called the service manager, said, I'm going to send this guy to you. And then he told me, go over there, learn. And when you get to where you need to be, I'll come get you, and you and me will work together. So he sent me off to a Dodge dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's how I got into a
More trial
dealership.
by
So,
fire into a Dodge dealer. More trial by fire and Dodge dealer.
oh, I'm very familiar with the A604, 41TE, 42LE, 44 through 46 RE. Yeah, I've had my hands in them all. So,
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
you are not
Numbers that
wrong.
bring back
Trial by fire.
numbers that bring back fond and not so fond memories. 454, and oh my goodness, all the random numbers adding on to the end of the 454, 455.
Yes.
Oh, it gets ridiculously complicated when it really doesn't need to be. When
No.
all it was, they had to add a number or a letter at the end because they changed an overdrive clutch or something stupid like that. It's like, it's the same bloody thing. All you need to do is the part species to change. You don't need to have a model number change. Give me a break. So cool. So your first year sounds like it was good. It sounds like you had positive reinforcement. It sounded like a lot of really good things in there. And one of the things that you identified that I really like in there, and I was literally having this conversation about 3 days ago with a young man who's been in the trade about 4 years, and he's asking about pay, and he's asking about, it's like, I've been doing this for this long, and I want to do more. It's like, okay, well, asking a whole bunch of questions, and one of the things that came up, and it's like, I really want to lead. It's like, you're 22, like you're 22. There's not too many people that are going to listen to a 20-year-old leading, almost ever. And it doesn't matter whether you work 16-hour days for 4 days, for 6 days a week for the last 4 years, and you've got twice the amount of time in as somebody who might only work 40 hours a week for the last 8. You're seldom going to get somebody to follow you. So one of the questions I tend to ask is, do you understand how to follow? And of course, I got the dog head tilt. The what? Like, one of the first things that I learned after being humbled several times was that in order to be a good leader, you need to learn how to follow. And you almost immediately understood that in order to gain trust from somebody that's teaching you, you need to follow the instructions. And to add on to that a little bit further, having the same kind of conversation with my 10-year-old, that he needs to learn the difference between asking a question and questioning the statement.
Oh yeah.
There's two really big differences. They're so completely different. And as a young individual in the trade, man or woman, you need to understand that when someone's giving you instructions, when it's appropriate to say, I don't understand, or can you explain this better? I don't understand, or this makes sense, this doesn't. Can you please, maybe rephrase it, maybe add a little more, whatever the case may be, versus that's stupid. I don't get it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. Like, the difference in mentality between questioning versus asking a question is really important and in part of that follow. So I'm really glad that you brought a literal example up for that. I appreciate that. So you've been working, you've been slinging wrenches now. You started in the dealership. So you started in a small store, not even a small store, a small repair shop. Then you moved to a Dodge dealer, and you've had your hands got your hands deep into transmissions with Dodges. So take me between that point and today. Give me some big kind of examples or some stories in there. What took you from there to where you are now at an import store?
Oh, well, it was another mentor in my life. He was a Toyota master for years, and he worked his way up into management. And so he came to a Dodge dealer and was my service manager. And he was watching me. I had two stalls, is what I had, because I was a differential and a transmission guy. And so I would always have two cars apart at any given moment in time, but they would always be in different stages of the repair process. So I'd throw one down on the bench, gut it. I'd order all my parts. I'd pull another one in, and I'd tear it down and gut it. And by the time I got that one gutted, I'd be building the other one and putting it back in. So he was watching me, and he would see me work those two stalls and put cars in and out. And so he asked me, because most of these were done under warranty, he asked me,
Mm-hmm.
how much does that pay? So I'd tell him what it would pay. And he just shook his head and he said, man, at Toyota, they would never pay you that little. In fact, we'd pay you that to just R&R transmission. And I thought, no, there's no way. Because that's all I knew. I went straight from working at a gas station to the Dodge dealer, and I just assumed that everybody paid you 8.4 hours to rebuild a rear-wheel drive transmission.
Right? Right?
That's what I thought. I thought that was what it was. That was my life. And I did a lot of them. And he's like, no, man, that's not normal. And so he ended up selling his house in California. And he was able to buy a house outright in Idaho, sitting on acreage, and not work for 3 years because the house in California sold for enough that he could take that time off. But that being said, he pulled me aside and he said, look, man, I'm getting out of California and I respect the work that you put out, but you should be making more money than what you're making here because the manufacturer isn't paying you according to what they're asking you to do, and you're doing it. He said, you could work for another manufacturer and they'll pay you what you're worth. I didn't really want to go because I was afraid of the change. And I thought that I had worked my way up through the ranks at Dodge. I'd had 7 years under my belt, and I felt like I understood the product. I felt comfortable using the special service tools, calling Star Center. I felt good, like I was established, and it was a scary thing to consider another car line. But he kept telling me that I could make more for less effort, and if I worked as hard as I was working here, I would make so much more. The choice was mine, is what he told me. So I just rolled the dice, and I went and I saw the service manager at the Toyota dealer he sent me to. They hired me, and I've been there since 2005 to present. So
not too many of those out there, my friend.
He wasn't wrong. Toyota, I'll give you for example, okay? When I left Dodge, Dodge was paying us 9/10 to do a ball joint recall that included adjusting camber.
Yep, I remember
We,
those.
we had to shear off 3 rivets on either side.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
When I showed up to Toyota, Toyota paid me 2.2 hours to change ball joints on the front that was bolted in, and that included adjusting camber and caster. I heard that and I would throw them at me all day long, all day long. And it was really funny because when I got there, the older guys that were there that were kind of a little jaded, from mistreatment over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because every dealership has people that feel that way. When I
Mm-hmm.
got in there and they were complaining, man, I can't believe they're gonna pay me 2.2 hours, and I remember this and that, and I was thinking to myself, I'll take it. I'll take it. Like, you have no idea how
Perspective,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Perspective. You've now. There's a lot to be said about, and this is where I go into how important leadership is. There's manufacturers. Some of them are financially more better off for the technician than others. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be warranty things from all manufacturers that don't necessarily pay well or much. And it comes down to the individual leading the shop or the business that's going to look at the team in the shop going, you know, let's take Clinton, for example. Clinton is absolutely busting ass on these 0.9 recalls. And we see the kind of work that he does, and we see the kind of effort that he puts in, and he's still not making time on it. So what can we do to help this individual who is obviously doing everything they possibly can with the right training, the right drive, the right tools, all of the resources that he can possibly utilize to make time on this, but he's still losing time. Now, I know there's all kinds of leaders out there. There really is all kinds of leaders out there that are doing everything they possibly can to make sure you guys make what you deserve from a hourly wage standpoint, as well as doing everything they possibly can from tooling and education, and going, hey, maybe he's done 15 of these recalls this week, and with all of this hard effort, he's still 80% productive. Like, somebody who works this hard, who puts in this kind of effort, deserves better, and they are doing better. I know a whole bunch of them personally that are doing above and beyond to try to make sure that technicians are making what they need to make in this scenario. But when you can go to a manufacturer that the manufacturer also responds in the same kind of way, that they make things that make sense, that makes everything a little bit easier, doesn't it? Right?
Oh,
It just makes
absolutely.
things a little bit easier. So, and it's not necessarily that the job is easier, it's just that the whole process is just a little bit easier. So I appreciate that. And to speak on the individuals who go, they're only paying 2.2, the fact that they don't have the perspective outside of that manufacturer or that shop and go, like, I was doing these for years for less than half of that. I'm happy to do it for this because I'm still busting my ass and now I'm making some money on it,
Yeah.
right? And that's where perspective really comes into play in time. So that's really awesome to hear. So go back. So you've been there since 05. So you're knocking on 20 years with Toyota as a brand. What are some of your favorite things to work on? I'm going to assume that you get to work on Supras.
I do. I do. I do work on
I
Supras.
am jealous, to say the least.
It's funny. You're probably one of the first persons that I've come across that feel that way, and I don't think they're a bad car. I don't mind working on them, and I'm not even a bit salty that it's not actually a Toyota. I think they're great cars.
I think they are too. I think they, you know what, for what it's worth, they tried to bring back a legend, right? They tried to bring back a legend, and whilst many will say that it's not even a Toyota, it's really a BMW with Toyota skin on it. But I've heard it before. Whether I believe it or not, it's a different story altogether. But the Mark IV Supra was kind of like that 1998 to about 2003. In my opinion, maybe it's because that's where I was going to high school and coming out of high school, and I was that age. I was 17 to 22 in around that age. That the cars then were kind of at what I would call like the pinnacle of automotive. And the reason why I say that is nannying stuff and electronics hadn't really come into play yet. There was traction control and there was ABS, and that was
Okay.
about it, right? We didn't have 175 different modules in the car. There might be 4, right? You had cars that were turbocharged. You had, high horsepower V8s, high horsepower turbocharged inline 6s. They made great noises. They hadn't really got super safe, right? Because they were just kind of figuring out that we can make something really fast with the lightness that they were back then. Because to give an example, I had a Dodge Neon, and my Dodge Neon from 1998 with me in it with the weight reduction was like 2,300 pounds max. That Supra, 3,300 pounds Mark IV, but it was 365 horsepower. Yes, it was heavy for the time, but it was stupid fast. It was all of the things that I look at from a definition of sports car. All of the cars in that kind of range, even the not so sporty stuff was sporty at that time, right? You've got R34 Skyline, you've got the Mark IV Supra, you've got the E46 BMW, you've got all of that inline 6 yumminess in that age, and then it just kind of started to get diluted with extra weight and extra electronic crap, and going to, how many manufacturers now produce an honest to goodness 6-speed gearbox now? Rear wheel drive, sedan, or even coupe for that matter. Like almost none. Right?
Well, I gotta agree with you. They were definitely different times. And for a second there, I wasn't sure that I agreed with your statement, but then you cleared it up, and you're absolutely right. It was before all the nannying, I believe, is what you said, right? All the
Mm-hmm.
nannying came in. So yeah, you're right. I agree with you.
It's the kind of time I use the phrase, I've driven a lot of cars in my lifetime. I've driven a lot of cars in my lifetime. I've built cars in my career. I've built, 800 horsepower Challengers. I put superchargers on. I put turbo kits on. I've done swaps. I've gutted stuff. I've helped build race cars, as it were, that never actually went to the track. I've done those kinds of things, and my SRT4 Neon is still the only thing that ever truly scared me, because front wheel drive and nearly 400 horsepower to the wheels, with torque steer is really scary at 130, 140 kilometers an hour when you drop it down a couple of gears and you nail the throttle, and all of a sudden the steering wheel comes out of your hands. Right? In a rear wheel drive car, even 800, 900 horsepower, you nail the throttle, the back end breaks loose. A little bit of throttle change, a little bit of steering wheel change, not a big deal. But when the
Yeah, you can
steering wheel is no
compensate.
longer in your hands, it's scary. So again, it's in that kind of timeline up to about 2003, 2004. And that's when things started to change. So, getting it back to topic of the new Supra, and that they've tried to recreate a legend. They did pretty well, I would say, in a lot of ways. It rides really nice. It sounds really nice. It doesn't sound like a Mark IV, but it sounds really nice. But I think the only thing that they missed the mark on is the price point. And I understand that chimes have changed, but in 1999, 2000, I think you could buy a Mark IV Supra in North America for like 35 grand,
Oh, you
right?
ain't doing that now.
You're not. It's, if I'm not mistaken, here in Canada they're about 125, right?
Ouch.
It's absolutely asinine in terms of price point. I understand it's a high horsepower sports car. It's a coupe. Like, they don't make that many of them. They have to be more expensive, but that much money,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Like a 25-year-old could afford a Supra in 19.
no,
So
I'm gonna have to agree with you there. And that's what separates me from that car is I just can't I can't justify that. I
no,
just had another child, so
that's
got a
awesome.
4-month-old. And
Yes,
so
you've got
the
no
idea
money.
of throwing
You've
that
got
money
no
down,
money.
well, it's the justification, right? You gotta, if I'm gonna throw $70,000 at something, it's got to be something that's gonna move everybody, not just me and the
Mm-hmm.
wife. So you like how I threw the wife in there too, because that would have to be part of the selling point. It's you and me, baby.
Well, I'm thankful that at this stage in life, my son, and we only have one. My son is 10, and I'm 40, so I bought my motorcycle, and nobody else gets to be on it because it's a motorcycle. The cool thing is it's still way faster than that Supra, and I think I paid about 13 grand, give or take, tax in, license on the road, right? So for a tenth of the price of the Supra, I can go faster, and quite honestly, it makes a way better noise.
I
So
would have to agree with that.
it's the cool things, and it's a Triumph, so it's a triple, so it sounds very not the same. It's not the same, but it sounds very similar because it's 3, not 4. That tune, that sets of threes, the 3, the 6, the 12, they have that similar note, varying degrees of pitch and so on and so forth. But I really wanted a triple. I got the triple, and it's absolutely amazing. So $70,000. Yeah, I would definitely have to say if it was that much money, my wife would definitely have to be part of that, and you have to be able to ride it. But my goodness. So back on topic. We derailed here a little bit, but that's okay because we're talking cars and bikes and stuff. So now that you've been at Toyota for almost 20 years, and you've gone through the last 5 years like everybody else has the last 5 years with all the ups and downs and challenges and so on and so forth, outside of now, because if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, you're now the shop foreman in that shop?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So now that you've progressed, you've gone from on your back in the gravel, doing a CV shaft, to a small shop learning, to a Dodge dealer for a long period of time, getting very good at transmissions and differentials with Dodge, amongst all of the other things that you have to deal with at Dodge. Lord knows we had to deal with a lot of stuff at Dodge. Then almost 20 years now at Toyota, progressing in all likelihood through all of the training that Toyota has to offer, learning how to lead people because you're now a shop foreman. Now that you're a shop foreman, outside of making sure that there's always technicians in every bay, which is a challenge right now, what would you say is your biggest challenge as a leader in the shop is?
I would have to say keeping people's attitudes. How would I put it? People tend to look at the negative side of things, and that to me is what pulls the brake on getting work done. So getting people to see that something isn't necessarily standing in their way, or something isn't necessarily an attack outright on their person,
Mm-hmm.
and that this is just part of a job, and that this is just part of a business, and that we have different people here with different personalities, and that has always been the hardest thing that I've seen in other shops that I've been in, and now I'm in the unique situation of having to deal with that. Because let's be honest, there's a different culture in the uh, front half of the building, right? Service advisors, and then technicians, and then the parts department. So you've got these 3 different cultures that have to work together with each other. And we see it in history, and we see it even today. When you have different cultures coming together, sometimes they clash, and we call that war, right? And so getting these different cultures to work together has been a challenge. A service advisor will write something up that doesn't make sense to a technician, so he takes it to the point, well, this asshole, he never gets enough information, and what is he talking about? And it's not a comeback. I told him the last time. And so there's there's that difference in perspective and personality, and being able to diffuse that and get people to realize that he's not questioning the quality of your work. The customer came in saying that ever since this, and so he has to write it up that way. It's not personal. Okay, so if you want to justify yourself and your skills, then get to the heart of the matter. Find out what it is. And the service advisors are like, oh, he never writes his story right. This guy makes me look like an idiot, the things he says, and like this and that. Okay, well, if you don't like the way that he writes his stories, then why don't you sit him down and why don't you have a conversation with them and say, hey, you realize that I just spent 15 minutes up front with this lady who now thinks that we're all idiots because X, Y, and Z. It doesn't always have to be this conflict where you go straight from reading a repair order, a story on a repair order, to you hating the guy. It's not personal. He's not trying to make you look like an ass. This is just what happens when we do business, right? Sometimes people's education is a little bit better. Some people are very tactful and very skillful in how they string their sentences together, and they can articulate their thought very well. And some people can't. So, I mean, these are all things that we got to take together. And as a foreman, I feel like I'm in the middle sometimes between this crossfire, and I got a guy that doesn't want to work now because he's upset with what happened there, and got a service advisor that doesn't necessarily want to work with that technician. I was like, hold on. We're all here to make money, right? We're all here to get the customer through this whole process without scarring them or chasing them away. So why don't we just put that aside? It's not personal. This is what I need you to do. This is what I'm willing to do to help you help me. And let's just move through this. And yeah, so that's to me,
awesome. That's
the
awesome.
hardest part.
I think there's so many foremen out there that are struggling with that very thing, and it's a difficult position to be in, because in many cases I've talked to individuals in the role who aren't capable of disseminating the difference between personal and professional, and that is such a big challenge to overcome for many. Because I think one of the things that we do as mechanics is that we make it part of our personality. It's not that it's something that we do, it's who we are. And I do it myself. I everything I look at it from a mechanic lens, where I have to fix something, right? And it's like, I have to do this. This is what I am. I have to do this. And when somebody critiques it or comments on it, my anxiety gets immediately to, it's like, oh, they're shirking on me, right? And that's crazy that I just did that in the background.
I thought you did that.
No, that's new features that I didn't know that I even had. So that perfect timing on that. But it really it's kind of a perfect thing, because taking criticism well is a skill. Like, you have to be able to take that criticism. It's like, why is this person saying what they're saying? Like, they're not attacking me. They're looking at it from their lens, looking at what's in front of them, dealing with the challenges they're dealing with. Like in your example for what you're saying, the advisor has a customer who's upset. For whatever reason that they're upset, it doesn't matter, but they're upset. They feel like they've been wronged, or they feel like their questions aren't being answered, or they feel like they aren't being taken care of. The advisor is doing whatever they can to mitigate all of that in every way that they possibly can. And they're going through those same challenges, trying to figure out how to help this customer. And I would suggest that there's a lot of shops out there that maybe the advisors aren't as well trained as they need to be in order to deal with those person to person, face to face with customer circumstances. But in the same sense, that the technicians aren't necessarily trained with the kind of skills they need to be able to deal with the service advisors in a professional way, right? Just like we're talking about how they write on a work order, right? Being able to articulate what they did, why they did, how they did, the important numbers they need to write down, the specs, and then the measured bits and pieces that they need to put on there, in a way that not only the service advisor who has some kind of technical knowledge, meaning that they see them all of the time on the work orders. They might not necessarily understand it, but they see it regularly enough that they're starting to become acclimatized to it. The customer knows nothing. Most of them know nothing, so it's complete gobbledygook to them. So now the service advisor is trying to translate those things. The technician, generally speaking, so far in my experience from coaching, and Lord knows how many technicians I've worked with over the last 20 plus years, the majority of us aren't taught how to write, let alone how to speak. So now I'm going back to this, trying to separate the difference between somebody trying to do their job and giving you feedback saying, this isn't working for me in order to be successful with our customers. Having that literal phrase going, this is not being successful. In order for me to be more successful with our customers, may we work on this thing, right? Maybe it's sentence structure. Maybe it's using enough words. Maybe it's using the right words or different words, or perhaps more detail, whatever the case may be. But having that conversation, it's like, I'm not attacking you. Like you said, I'm not attacking you. I just want us to be more successful. I want this to be easy for us so that it's also easy for the guest, right? And that's a real challenge. That's a real challenge. So I really appreciate you from sharing that. So that's an awesome segue into what would be your one piece of advice for a technician? You've got lots of experience now. What's your one piece of advice to help a technician be happier, healthier, more productive tomorrow?
I gave this a lot of thought, and it's really twofold. But it's take ownership. And the reason it's twofold is take ownership of your training and take ownership over the work that you do. And the reason why I say take ownership of your training is that the manufacturer is going to send us to training. They will. They want to keep us up to date with the new models and the changes in technology. But they're not going to necessarily give us that edge that will up our game. And what I mean is, I'm a smog technician. And so I have to sit in a smog class every 2 years. And I sit in this class filled with people from the aftermarket world. And as a factory trained technician, I listen to them talk about Faraday's law. I listen to them talk about using the picoscope to measure NVH and all these different things. And I started to realize that the manufacturer wasn't using those tools to diagnose cars. And so I started to train myself. I started to look into the aftermarket world for training. And what I realized was that there was a whole area of diagnostics that was untapped, and things started to go really well for me in my diagnostic ability the moment I tapped into that. And if I relied on the manufacturer to get me there, I wouldn't be there. And so our training is really our own responsibility. It's not our jobs. It's not the manufacturers. And if I may, I'd like to share an experience that I had.
Please do.
I had a current model year vehicle that was displaying a very strange condition under very hard to replicate conditions. And so I wanted to take a snapshot of the vehicle running. So I plugged in the scan tool. I went on a road test. I did a VE test, and I measured the fuel trim at cruising speed. And so I had all the data collected, and I brought it back home, and I got to looking at it. And what I could see was under certain conditions, it would go excessively lean. And then on other conditions, it would go excessively rich. And I'm talking like max each way, max rich, max lean. So I got on the phone and I was talking to some engineers, and they couldn't explain it to me. And they weren't even interested in pursuing it. So I thought, well, that's strange. So I called up a friend that I have at the local training center, and I showed him the file, and we got to talking about it. And he says, well, if I'm going to be honest with you, the factory hasn't explained this to us. He said, in fact, you won't find it in writing. which I tried to find it in writing. I couldn't find anything in the information provided. So Brendan Steckler was in a Facebook group that I belong to. So just for kicks and giggles, I went ahead and I sent him a DM. And he called me. He said, send me that file. Let's take a look at it. So we got to taking a look at it, and he says, this is very unique. This is very strange. He says, let me talk to a friend of mine. I'll get back to you. And he did. And we had this conversation, and it went like this. He says, I think that you found something, but there isn't anything in writing about this. So here's what I recommend you do. Hold on to this file. At some point in time, this file will make sense. And when you get that information, look back at this file and you'll just know what it is. And he told me that sometimes we find information that we don't really understand until we fix the car, we diagnose it, and then when we look back at the information and the data that we collected, it stands out. You see it. And so he said that what you're going to run into being at the dealership is that the manufacturer is really only interested in helping you fix 70% of the cars, because the other 30% they have field reps for. Or they'll buy the car back, they'll figure it out themselves, and then they'll fix it in a bulletin or in a recall. They're not interested in training you to be the best technician that you could be so you could fix every car that comes through the dealership. They just need you to be 70% good enough. And I thought, damn, that actually kind of makes sense, because they're not in the business of fixing cars, right? They're in the business of selling cars, and fixing cars is what I do. So if I want to be good at fixing cars, then guess what? I have to train myself. And if I'm waiting for them to train me, what's their incentive to train me? They're only concerned with 70%, and they trained me 70%. So if you want
to, that's enlightening to no end. Like I use the 80% rule for just about everything except for one thing, which is I use the 70% rule for replacing a car. So if you figure, if you want to drive a brand new truck, if you've got a truck and you want to replace it with another brand new truck, and a brand new truck's going to cost you $1,500 a month, that's roughly $18,000 in a year in payments. So 70% of that, if your repair bill for the year is going to exceed 70% of that, go replace the truck. That's the only time I use 70%, but 70%, fixing 70% of the things, being trained to only repair 70% of the things at the brand level makes sense, because now they're going to deal with it the other way. Because I guess that would probably be their risk assessment kind of idea. Now, 70% is something that you and I are talking about right now that's not in writing anywhere, but I would imagine that's probably pretty close to what it really is, because that makes sense. And what you're also saying, I like the holding yourself accountable for your own training, because that's really big. And I have data to support the training from a factory position, right? I've got over 500 technician surveys submissions submitted to date on the Wrench-Turner's Wellness Survey, and the numbers have stayed pretty consistent between level 1, 2, and 3. I don't go above and beyond that, because most of them will say feedback on the survey. I've got more than this, whatever. But the level 1 income, level 1 complete, your basic training complete, has an income. It stayed pretty much the same across all of them. It's $40,000 a year. The level 2, the intermediate level training across the board complete, it's about $60,000 a year. No more, no less, for the most part. Changes a little bit by demographic area. And the level 3 complete, the advanced level training. Now, obviously, there's doctors of the house and, complete training complete, blah, blah, blah. It's in excess. It starts basically, base income is like $80,000 a year and above, and the average is $110,000 a year for level 3 brand training and more. Now, what I also can say is, now I'm starting to see the pattern is those folks that are making north of a certain amount, it's about north of the average. So anybody making more than $110,000 a year as a technician, they're all flat rate. All of them are flat rate. So anybody that says you can't make money as a flat rate technician and you're never going to make $100,000 a year as a flat rate technician doesn't truly know, has never truly experienced, has never been in a team environment that is possible. Secondly, all of those $110,000 a year technicians or more have all kinds of additional training. Most of them have multiple ASEs, because it's one of the specific things I asked for on the survey. When I've gotten to talk to technicians through coaching that are making that kind of money or more, most of them also say they have training outside of the manufacturer that isn't ASE. So whether
You
it's
have
soft
to.
skill, hard skill, or technical skill outside, they all have more training outside. So I really like the fact that you've brought that into the fray, that you are responsible for your own training. And realistically speaking, no training is ever going to be a waste. Ever.
No,
Ever.
no.
Because you're going to learn something, right? You're going to learn something. So you mentioned here you go to smog training every 2 years. And for the most part, most of that's probably fairly similar, but I would say probably 70% of that is probably pretty similar every time you go, but there's a little bit new every time. But one of the
Yeah.
things that doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, is that when you go to training as a technician, 80% of the value of that training isn't the training. 80% of the value of going to training is meeting the other technicians that have the ambition, drive, and intelligence and capability of doing the same thing you're doing, that you get to talk to and build relationships with.
I
Those are
agree
the
with that.
people, especially the outside the technical training, like the brand technical training. When you start doing training, the independent kind of training, from what I'm getting from feedback, is that they start to build relationships with the other individuals that have the capability, the knowledge, and the drive to learn more, to fix problems, faster so they can make money doing that repair, or repairs, or plural. And then, like you've just also shared that same story, you've had a very interesting, very random, very hard to diagnose circumstance on a current model of your vehicle. You've contacted somebody, something that a relationship you've built over time with another technician. They've then pulled another technician into the fray saying, "Oh, look at this," right? And now you have three heads trying to work on one problem, something that the three of you have never seen before, trying to come up with a solution. All really big brains, all looking for solutions, all trying to come up with a solution to better the guest experience, right? That is the kind of stuff at that level. If you want to get to, and I'm diatribing here, folks, I apologize, but this is the progression, right? This gentleman here in front of us, Mr. Clinton Cruz here, has got what I would say almost the definitive lineage of a technician. You've come into the trade, you've worked your ass off, you've learned a brand, you've made a leap to another brand to try and better yourself and better your income, better your family. You've stayed loyal and learned. You've learned people skills, communication skills, management skills, and now you're leading teams. And now you've built relationships over a period of time so that now you have individuals like yourself that are driven, capable, and intelligent to help you solve problems. I couldn't have asked for a better example of what I believe many should be striving to look for. You've talked about, how it can get negative in the shop, how being positive is going to overcome some of the challenges that we have, how getting your training right overcomes some of the challenges that we have, building a network overcomes some of the challenges we have. You come up with more tools that aren't literal tools to help us do our job. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to meet people in my life that have made me the technician that I am. So if there's anything valuable in me, it was because I met valuable people. So I like the idea of surrounding yourself with good people, people that have qualities that you admire, whether it's speaking ability, it's diagnostic ability, or just being a solid human being. If you surround yourself with people that have qualities that you want, then you can emulate that by seeing them do it. And so if you see anything here, it's because I was around good people.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to end the show. Clinton, I really appreciate you giving us some time today. What a bloody enlightening show. I really appreciate it.
No, it was my pleasure, man.
Awesome.
I've been listening to your podcast, and I really appreciate what you do. You've got some really great guests that come on, and there's been quite a few that lit a light bulb, and I've been pulling that into my shop too. So
I
just keep
appreciate
doing
that a
what you're
lot.
doing.
Like I keep saying, I'm it till I'm dead or you find somebody better. So I'm it.
Well, you're a good it.
All right. Folks, I think that's the end of another episode of the Wrench Turners podcast, but don't forget there will be another one coming next week. I have stuff lined up all the way through to the summertime already. I've even got a series coming up for you. I think I talked about it on the last outro on the last show. I'm going to do a recruiter series coming out in June. I've got a list of about 4 or 5 recruiters, a couple from within automotive, a couple surrounding automotive, maybe trade based, to try and get you guys educated on what happens through the recruiting process. Because I've had a whole bunch of DMs and emails about it. It's like, this recruiter reached out to me and I don't know what to do. Hopefully what I can do during that series is enlighten you folks on what the process is, how it works, some of the tips and tricks to help you get through that process if you happen to be headhunted, as it were. So folks, watch out for that coming up in June. Now, folks, remember, Wrenches for Wrenches newsletter bi-weekly, continues to come out bi-weekly. I think I'm on edition number 38. I can't believe I've been writing that bloody thing for getting close to 2 years now, folks. So keep watching out for that every 2 weeks. Wrench Turners merch. My mother loves her sweater. Check out the link below on Spotify and on YouTube. The link's in the description. Check it out. Support the show. And lastly, but never leastly, quote for the end of the show for today: it is easier to prevent bad habits than break them. Benjamin Franklin. Negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.